Welcome to the Centre for Computing History in Cambridge. I'm Mike James from the Retro Gaming Roundup podcast, and with us today is another Mike, who we're going to spend a couple of hours with later for a special event, the Bitmap Brothers versus Sensible Software. So Mike, first of all, if you can tell us how you got started in the industry, what interested you about the industry, and basically what kicked off the Bitmap Brothers when you get there.
Well, it's quite a long story because it goes back when I was a manager for Woolies, and one day they brought a computer. They sent this sheet, which was a computer. What do you call it? A drawing, and it told you how to lay out the store. And it was like, well, it's telling me to put rock here, but actually in the season you put rock at the front because that's where you track the, So what's going on? What's a computer about? So from that, I didn't actually know anyone that's got a computer. When I was at college, I didn't go on the course because like years ago it was just punch cards, and I just thought these cards you just got, they were for sewing, doing that tapestry type thing.
Cross stitch.
Cross stitch, that's right, that's the one. So what I did is actually then I was smoking, so I decided I couldn't afford a computer, so I stopped smoking, bought myself a ZX81, and then I still didn't know anyone apart from the guy I bought it from in the shop who knew, nothing. So I started to buy Computer Weekly. Yeah, Computer Weekly, and then type in all these hex numbers in, great fun.
Yeah.
And then you find things don't work. Great fun. And after a 16K program, that's when I migrated to the Spectrum, which was actually very quick, probably about 2 or 3 months.
Even with that keyboard?
Even with that keyboard, yeah. Actually, then I did actually have a proper keyboard. I modified my Spectrum to have I managed to have the 16K RAM pack, and I thought, and then it must have, was that the ZX81? We get a 16K RAM pack, but then why have you got...
The ZX81 had a 16K, yeah.
But then why have you got 1K on the board that you can't use? So I managed to remap it, so I had 17K,
right.
Which was just like, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was just putting wires until it worked.
A lot of people who programmed the ZX Spectrum, because of that keyboard, used to use something like an Amstrad and interface the keyboard into the Spectrum just so it was easier to type.
Oh, did they? I just bought a keyboard that just fitted in,
right.
that just ribbon one that you put it in. So anyway, after, as I say, I don't know, this must have been ZX81. When I wrote this 16K program on the RAM pack it was a Cricket, and it just didn't work. So then I got into the first thing I actually did was to learn machine code to understand what all the instructions was, and then I wrote a disassembler. So I disassembled everything that I'd actually done. And then from that, it was just a case of doing more of the same and sending off to magazines, the bugs, and never getting any magazines saying, "Oh, thank you," or printing it, and it's like really soul destroying. So then I wrote a word processor, and that was on the Spectrum then, and I had proportional characters and stuff like that, and being dyslexic, I had a very simple spell checker in it, but it would only do like 2 or 3 letters or something, But and then from that, I had a printout, and then in the computer magazine, in the weekly one, again, I saw there was Leisure Genius for advertising for programmers, and I thought, I'll go and apply for that just because I don't know anyone and see how good I am, because you don't know. So there I am, I've gone up to London for this meeting, and they, sat me down, and I showed them all my printouts and showed them my word processor and a few other things I'd done. And I went, this was probably an interview went on because I could talk for a couple of hours, and then that was the end of the interview. And I think, all right, I'm going home now. And they said, well, do you want a job? And I went, no, I just come to find out how good I am. And they went, well, actually, you're very good. And I went, oh. And they said, can you start Monday? And I went, no, I don't want a job, thanks. And like they said, well, there's a job if you want it. So I went home, and I lived in Clacton then. And I'm thinking on the train, I'm bored at work.
At Woolies.
At Woolies, yeah. So I phoned them up on Monday, and I said, the next day, which was must have been like it was a Tuesday or Wednesday or Thursday, something like that. And I said, how much you paying? And when they told me, I just laughed. I went, no, can't work for that. That's like a third of what I'm earning now. So no, forget it. And then over the weekend, I spoke to my wife, and we decided that actually I was bored and she was at work, she was working, so if we got a bit of a pay cut for this new career, it might be worth it. So I phoned him up Monday and said, yeah, I'll start, but I can't start today, obviously, a bit of notice. So I started a week later.
So this is, I'm guessing, early, mid-80s around there, where computers are sort of coming into schools, or just predating that maybe a bit? Was it an industry you thought, this is going somewhere and I should be in it, or not?
Well, no, not at all, because the thing is, I didn't know anything then. It was just, it was purely...
You'd taught yourself machine code.
I taught myself machine code and assembler by then, and then it's like, this is obviously Z80. And then, so anyway, I turned up on Monday, on the Monday morning, and they were... I didn't know at the time, but they were actually quite technically advanced, because they had... we were using, I've seen them out there, pets.
Yeah.
With an Apple ring, a token Apple ring network.
Token ring, yeah.
With this big sort of box that was, as the file server, and everyone was centrally on there. And what we used to do all day was to actually program from when we got there. Well, that comes in a minute, to 8 when we got there, until about 6 o'clock at night. And then we're all stopped. We're all close our work down, and we go down the pub because we had to do the compile, which took about 2 hours.
Right, yeah.
And of course, what we used to do was to send someone back. Well, probably somebody back every half hour to fix all the syntax errors that were there. So by about 11 o'clock, we were pretty merry, and we got compile, done. And then the next day it was do a bit of debugging and start again, and that's how it was. But it was strange, because when I got there, there is me with my ZX 80 programming, and then they put me on the 64, Commodore 64. Now it was a C6. It might have actually been a Commodore, the VIC 20. Could have been. I'm not sure, but it's like what? And they took the mickey out of me a bit, because I took 2 days to clear the screen, and all you got to do is hit one of the hardware.
I was going to say, how did you fit in amongst the rest of the team? Because you taught yourself, presumably they all had. So you're in a similar boat. How were you, on a par with those?
Well, there was 2 guys. There was me and another guy that started roughly on the same week. We were self-taught. The rest were actually university guys that were far superior to us. And then. So I worked on there, and I did being dyslexic. I did Scrabble, of course. I didn't tell anyone for about 3 or 4 years that I was dyslexic, because when you're working on Scrabble and this is a new job, you don't want to tell them actually if a word's wrong, you've got no idea whether it's wrong or not.
So did that affect your machine code and your assembler at all, or was it?
No,
something you could just work around.
It's something you can work around, and nowadays it's a lot easier, because with the auto completions it's easy. In those days it was. I found the word continue. I still cannot spell the word continue.
Right.
It just doesn't. It's just one of those words that doesn't make sense to me. As letters. So, but then you would cut and paste it, because you'd use it all day. So it was almost, you knew where it was. Cut and paste, put it there. So you got around. I think that there are actually quite a lot of dyslexic programmers around. In fact, there's an awful lot. Quite a few companies I worked in the last couple of years, I would say that probably 20% are. Some of the guys. Yeah, I think what makes a good programmer is somebody. If they're dyslexic, it's because they know how to solve problems, because they have to solve problems with dyslexia all the time. So they work round things in a different way to other people sometimes. And so it's problem solving, and that's all programming is really, is problem solving.
So you're in the industry now. Then you set out on this career path that you found yourself almost stumbling into, by the sounds of it. So how did you go then from seeing something that you typed into that computer on the shelf for sale? What was that process?
Well, I don't think that process. That process has been there for years. I don't think the process has actually changed much over the years either. One of the first games that I worked on was Scrabble or Monopoly and stuff like that. And we used to have a team of people. Then we used to have the programmers. We had a designer. We had the artists, and we had the music guys, which is very similar to what it is now.
Well, there's a lot of people, especially from Atari, things like that, would do the whole product. They would make the cartridge, they would do the artwork, they would do the manual with the story in, they would code the game themselves, they would do the whole process. Did you find yourself doing a complete game like that, or were you always sort of part of a team that worked on a game?
No, I was always part of a team. Always part of a team, and we were always quite technically advanced as well in the way that we were doing things. I was using, say, networks. On my first job. We were using cross compilers and stuff like that on PCs, probably well before anyone else. I wrote some of the debugging tools from the PC to the ST and the Amiga and stuff, and actually the ZX81 and the whole lot. Mm-hmm. It was only when when some of the bigger chips came out that I stopped doing that. Well, because then you could get the development systems to actually do it. Yeah.
You mentioned the Amiga there. Now we're going to be talking about some of your Amiga games later. Do you want to talk about some of those games a bit later in your career? Some of the Bitmap Brothers time.
Yeah, I mean, as you know, the Bitmap Brothers have done various games over the years. I mean, we started off with Speedball, then there was Xenon, then there was Speedball 2, then there was Xenon 2, then there was. Can't remember.
Turn around, they're all behind you.
No, I can't remember. I'm trying to get the order, but I can't. But anyway, it was God's Magic Pockets, Chaos Engine, The Payoff, Z, Steel Soldiers, and World War II. I think I've missed one, but anyway. So it's, so there's a whole variety of games there, for everything from sports simulation, which Speedball is, even that's futuristic sports. It's a simulation of sports, really. To simulations of arcade machines, as in Xenon 2, and shoot 'em ups and that sort of stuff. So we did a wide range, really.
So what sort of hardware were you working on at Bitmap Brothers? Were you typing into Amigas, coding on Amigas, or were you on PCs? How did you work?
No, we were on PCs and Well, no, that's not true. Some of us were on PCs. I was on a PC virtually. Well, Xenon was actually written on an ST, and then ported over onto the, not ported over, but then when I was doing it on the Amiga, I was taking the code from one to the other and compiling it on the Amiga, but the actual editing was done on the ST. And then after that, everything was PC and cross compiled because it was a lot easier. And as I say, I wrote an interface that downloaded it into the Amiga or the ST, so that you could debug it on the PC as well. Because with games is when you're actually debugging on the machine you're working with, it's actually very hard because you can't see what's on the screen because it's obviously you're in the debugger. Mm-hmm. So, but if you've got a debugger on a PC or on another machine, you can actually see what's happening, and it's a lot quicker to debug.
So, was there a stage where you felt you struggled a bit with the step, with your dyslexia, or for any other reason, where you're going from the Spectrum to the VIC-20, the VIC-22, the 64, or to the Amiga or to the PC? Was one step bigger than the others, maybe?
No, not at all. In fact, the steps were a lot quicker every time. Right. I mean, we went from doing Z80 to 6502 to 68,000. To doing MIP stuff and 86. I found actually an assembler was extremely easy because it's assembler as a limited instruction set, and also for dyslexia, the words are very short. Yeah. It's opcodes and stuff that are actually short to type, which makes it really quick. Also makes it very quick to type because you're only doing 4 or 5 letters at the most. Mm-hmm. I mean, nowadays with C++ and Sharp and all that stuff, they tend to. It's a lot slower, but it's not a lot slower because now also we've got auto completion. But I mean, it's like Java. We did Java for a phone. I started on a phone. I don't know. This was with John Hare, something like
Tower Studios.
At Tower Studios, something like 13 years ago. It took me half a day to learn Java.
Right.
I was actually. I had some code to actually start with because I took some code over from somebody else, but it was literally, there's the book. Well, I don't read books. That's not true, actually. I do read. I do technical manuals. I do tend to read more than other things. But I skipped through it, what I want to know, and then just went from there. And I think with programming is once you know one language, the rest of the languages just follow through. There's very, very, very few languages I actually haven't done. And in assembler, I think I've probably done, certainly up to the very modern chips. I've done assembler programming, I've did pick programming and all sorts. As a hobby type.
I mean, back in that era, something like the Z80 was in a lot of systems. It was all over the place. So if you could program for that, you could program for a range of systems.
Well, that's right. I mean, the Z80 was probably one of the most popular chips. But then the 68,000 was. Yeah.
6502
range.
as well.
In fact, 6502, which was just it was 6502, 610. Oh, well, there was loads of them, but they were very almost the same.
Do you still code these days, or have you given that up? And are you one of these programmers who programs all day at work and then goes home and thinks, right, I'll just tinker about with this for a little bit?
Sadly, not. Not tinkering about. Actually, I still program. I still probably do 12-hour day programming as well. I've been working today. I got up at 6 o'clock and finished just before I left here. I'm not doing it for myself. I've done some stuff for myself over the years, but it's mainly I work for Simply Man Studios at the moment. I'm doing network programming, which is Java and SQL and C++ and all that. So it's just good. But the problem is I'm just a workaholic when it comes to programming because I love it so much. Yeah. It's a hobby. It's not a job. I get paid for it. It's great.
That's it, yeah. If you find a job you love, you never work a day in your life.
That's right. And actually, it was about 7 years ago, I wrote a real-time real compiler, which was actually taking opcodes and then writing the assembly side of them for the MIPS and the 886, which was like, there's not many people probably in the country can actually do that. And that was great fun because it was like, that was my niche. I had sort of 2 months of doing this, and it was just like brilliant. I don't think I slept in those 2 months actually.